Om Utistata Jagrata Prapya Varani Bodhata Shirashya Dara Nishita Durataya Durgam Patastat Kavaya Vadanti. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. Approach the wise teachers and learn from them. For sharp as a razor's edge is the spiritual path, and difficult to navigate. So say the wise. And the wise also say, there shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us. May that Brahman sustain us. May that Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, with the teachings, and with what we study. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat. So we are coming to you a few minutes late, technical difficulties solved, and now we want to try and solve any mental difficulties, philosophically speaking, that might have remained in our minds since last week's first installment of the Kshurika Upanisad, the sharp knife that cuts through barriers to successful spiritual life. Right now, those barriers aren't so subtle. As I was driving here, cars are parked outside of houses on Sunday. That I'd never seen so many cars at so many different houses, and we finally figured out, well, it's Super Bowl time. So they're all gathering in front of TVs and spending their time in that wise, or not so wise, depending on your opinion. But what we're doing here at that time is meeting for discussion and deep contemplation of the Upanishads, not very well known, not an unpopular topic, because it's just not known well enough in this day and age to be popular or unpopular. Nevertheless, we engage in the deep study of that. Those are the words of wisdom that remove the doubts and barriers and obstacles and impediments of different kinds that the various spheres of yoga have, and Vedanta and Samkhya and Buddhism and Tantra and Jainism, and on we go with these different religious movements in India, which is rich with them, have mentioned to us. And in this day and age, therefore, I would aver that the Kshurika Upanishad is one that could be very helpful to us. And we found out last week by studying the new chart that I created on it 2 weeks ago, using this sharp blade of discriminating knowledge, viveka, we might say, named after Swami Vivekananda, who came to us to bring this knowledge in the late 1800s. And again, he came to us in the early 1900s. So these trips he made to the West were to avail us of and fortify us with these teachings of the Upanishads. 108, as we know, and this is one of the 108, the Kshurika. And you can see that I've already put the shortest Upanishad ever written in next issue of Nectar of Non-Dual Truth Journal, which comes out in a couple weeks now. So that's issue 39. And the shortest Upanishad of all was the Avyakta. I looked through a haul of 108, and it fit in a nice little sidebar next to one of the articles that we have in journal about the different religious traditions of the world and how they all sincerely lean towards realization of that highest goal in human existence. So the thought struck me that I wonder if there's a Upanishad that's so short that could fit in a little sidebar of a magazine. And sure enough, I found it in the Avyakta Upanishad. So you may look for that. The Kshurika Upanishad is another very short one. Remember last week we were looking at it in terms of what some 26 slokas is all. So those can be condensed down into 23 slokas, can be condensed down into the imagery, symbolism, and quotes that I've put on this chart. And we might want to just do a speedy 1-minute review of that to warm us up to the topic, because this is the second and final class on that Upanishad that we will give next week. By the way, we're on retreat here in Hawaii for 2.5 days, studying and pondering deep subjects like this. So remember that last week we looked at this new chart, and what we found was that it was directing us to symbolically to parts of the body, which is also what you must do with these 7 chakras, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the one beyond is not, of course, shown in the image. It's not, sometimes isn't even called a chakra. It's the Sahasrara, or the 1,000-petaled lotus, which has to do with things like nirvana, samadhi, nirvikalpa, asampragyata, satori, and Zen. These very transcendent and endearing, as we were talking about yesterday at satsang, very endearing secrets of the wise. So in this chart, remember that we had the 6 chakras listed out there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, actually, the 7th is actually shown up there as the Om sign. And we saw that the Upanishadic seers, the rishis they were called, connected to us to parts of the body. So the new embodiment was an important thing. As I said last week, it can either be a cage of decaying bones and flesh, or it can be a sacred temple that the soul resides in. And I think that's up to the individual to make it one or the other. Sri Ramakrishna said much the same thing about that when he said, heaven and hell are both right here, and they're not someplace high above or down below, as we know or should know. So then it's up to the soul to make this life one of those two. It could be a paradisical experience where one's very peaceful, equanimous, and full of wisdom from the seers and from the scriptures, or it could be a totally forgetful life where suffering easily finds its way into the human context, as we see around us in our very lives, what to speak of what the media is showing us these days. So in that way, without going too long-winded on the subject, we looked last week at this chart and how we studied the symbology that's associated with the feet, with the knees, and with the thighs. And we covered that much, and then we left mere mention of the fact that the next place is the neck, where these nadis, you're purifying these nadis of a specialized energy. Prana to psychic prana to Shakti is how it would be talked about in more current times. So you become aware of higher levels of consciousness, you've heard of that, or intelligence starts to vibrate in a finer way, awareness starts to vibrate in a finer way. And so you have access all of a sudden to what's always been inside of you. And this is why we want to look at subjects like purification of impediments in such a way that we'll never agree to the fact that these impediments are real. In Vedanta, these are all false superimpositions that the individual soul placed in front of itself, and probably with the help of lots of other conditionings. Conditionings would be like upbringing and rebirth and samsara, not getting spiritual dharma given to you when you were young, maybe falling under the evils of false religion and problems of politics and money making. All of these things add into that mix, that admixture that's so unhealthy, and those can be a part of the colorings inside of the nadis. So that's what we found out was the result of the feet, right? And because obviously we wouldn't just go and meditate on our feet and then hopefully that that would do away with our karma. So the feet must have some sort of symbology or assignment to them. So you act on your feet, you move on your feet, you do actions, and you reap effects from your movement. That's all. Karma just pretty much means to act, if you want the most basic of all definitions for that word. So karma has become known to the world as a word in all languages, probably. There's a reap what you sow kind of understanding in not only in religion, but also in society, that you have to be very careful with your actions, or these things will come back on you inevitably. So in that way, you have to be very careful of where you put your feet, which way, how you walk. There's all sorts of little clicky sayings that are there, that walk a mile in my shoes, or be careful with every step you take, or journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. I mean, you can start calling forth all of these little sayings about the importance of being conscious about how you act. So the feet, that's what the symbology of the feet means. We looked at that last week. And basically, I put it here in the chart as just good and bad karmas. And if I had had more room there, I would have put mixed in there too, because mixed karma is a real problem where people do bad things and then good things happen to them right away. So the idea being that this karma takes a while to come around, so you can't judge right away by the act you're doing in the moment what happens tomorrow or next month or next year or next lifetime as to what was the nature of the karma that you just perpetrated. So probably, as the Buddhists say, punya and papa. Punya, good merit; papa, negative merit. So they say, since we don't know the difference and the mixed gets in there and confuses us, let's just stay punya. Let's just do good merit all the time. Then we won't have this problem later on of negative karmas coming forth and we not knowing what the cause was. Then, as the Upanishad said, well, it was either just the law of karma that dictated that, or it was my poor understanding. So the Indian rishis will place the blame, as it were, in those two places. A very beautiful and humble way of doing it. So that's what the feet means. So just quick review of that. That's a locale, and so direction would be the next thing. Which direction shall I place my feet towards, right? And I tried walking without my knees the other day just to prove my own theory. So walking around the room, and if I tried to ignore my knees and not use them, then I was sort of like a robot, the way it tries to turn corners or turn around, falling over and so forth. So it really is true that the knees have to do with the direction you decide to go to. So it's not something that people usually think about. Say, well, I'm thinking I'm going to turn left. And so they just, like a robot, do that. They pivot on their knees. And, probably their hips and ball and socket joints have something to do with that too. So the symbology of all this is building up to the fact that the knees really designate direction that you're taking. So the ability to attain a proper direction would be the symbology of that. Now, these are just physical representations of these things, but now you have to go and meditate on the actions you did that are symbolized by the feet, and go and look at the directions you took, which are symbolized by the knees. I have to keep repeating these kinds of things so there's no confusion, and it's absolutely crystal clear, we hope. It becomes a lot more difficult when you rise to the thighs, where the generative organs are lodged between the thighs. And this has to do, of course, wouldn't take a genius to say, that has to do a lot with being born, with becoming conceived, as it were, as they say, your upbringing, your parents and your upbringing, and your death and your rebirth. Has to do with the generative faculties. So that is a naughty equation there. No pun intended either. Naughty equation. And we want to make sure that we understand that in India, at least, with these darshanas, and they look deeper into the principle of rebirth. And they saw that it was happening in a cycle. Lord Buddha was probably the most recent of the more current, because India is so ancient, the more current rishis who accented that. And he accented it to what's called Paticca Samutpata, or with its 9 nidanas. It's like a chain with 12 links. So basically, it has to do with you're being born ignorant, and then getting attached to name and form, and then a whole series of nidanas, or these links in the chain, which bring you back to your rebirth. So again, you can look at that rendering of what we did with that in the new Nectar of Non-Dual Truth, issue 39, which will be coming out soon, because we put a nice piece on Paticca Samutpata. It really just means interdependent arising. So basically, when you could look at it karmically, and the Buddhists do, but they also have other ways of looking at it, as the Indian rishis did as well, is that everything's connected. And the connecting point is the mind, and that's where we're getting to. These nadis that we're trying to purify at the feet, at the knees, and at the hips, or at the thighs, is kind of what this is pointing at now. And we read this quote on the chart that said, just as oil receives the fragrance of jasmine, the nadis get the good and bad scent of actions done, which can be removed by meditation. So this is why you would sit down, and maybe suffering would cause you to sit down and ask yourself, why am I suffering? It's not the highest question to ask yourself. We'd rather see people sit down and ask, who am I? And that's really jumping to the chase, because that gets beyond the ego. But if you sit down and ask, why am I suffering? It's a start, but the ego is going to step forward and said, I don't know anything about it. I don't have anything to do with that. That's your kuleana. I'm sorry, a word in Hawaii, it means that's your business. And so basically, the ego is going to deny that it has anything to do with your suffering. But when your pleasure comes forth, it's going to take all the credit. So this is why people sit down to meditate, and they're going to have to consider their actions that they did, not only just yesterday and today and tomorrow, which is good, but what their actions were dictating last lifetime. That's called sanchita karma. So when you look at the feet, you see it's not going to be so easy as just to say, okay, I'll just do punya and quit doing papa. You see, I'll just do good actions from now on and quit doing papa. But you've got a residue left over from papa, from demerit that's going on. And part of that brought you back into the body in this lifetime, which you're now suffering and enjoying. Suffering, enjoying, that's one of those dualities that we want to bring out a lot in the spiritual context or philosophical context. So you can see now how this is also a connecting point to this many tangled, twining branches of a tree. You see, that's as we were saying, more like the aswata tree in the Gita rather than the 8-limbed tree of Patanjali in yoga. What we're seeing there is that's this tree of nadis, just like it, again, is why the physical symbology is so important, is because if you look at the human being, there's enough nerves and vessels and everything that if you were to take them out and tie them together, it would stretch for a long, long way. That's how intricate the nerve system is just physically in the human being. So now you're going to have to make the jump to nerve currents that are conducting something higher than blood, and energy, but more like energy. And so a little bit about prana we've been able to come to know about. So we know that there's something, causing us to move and breathe and our heart to beat and so forth. And when we begin to study that prana, then we're getting more to the crux of the whole teaching here, is that basically you want to purify, put it this way, there have been colorings in the prana. I like to call them spikes and valleys in people's energy. So sometimes they'll spike and you'll feel good, kind of sattvic, and then a couple of days later it'll be a valley and you'll feel depressed. And so the mind is trying to find some steady ground there amidst that. And probably the mind of today isn't thinking about, well, I think I'll go meditate up on my feet and my knees and see what's going on here. In other words, if the Upanishadic Rishi is my guide, then he's going to tell me to go look at my past actions, trace everything back to Sanchita karma in the past, and then understand Prarabdha karma in the present, you see. And now I'll be in control of the Sanchita karma, the Agami karma in the future. So these three kinds of karma are there to be studied in our tradition, in Indian traditions basically. Sanchita, past, Prarabdha, present, Agami, future. And those are connected, and the lifetime cycle of samsara is based in a great amount on that kind of karmic repercussion. You reap what you sow would be the simple way of saying that to people. So, and Pratitya Samutpada would be one of the more complicated and in-depth ways of saying it to people who want to do this study. So anyway, the feet and the knees, it's hard to leave them behind because basically we want to assign them to this network, these branches on this tree of asvat, this tree of Maya or samsara that have become colored by good and bad fragrances. I mean, you can add jasmine to oil and hope for a good perfume, but you can also add foul things, smelling things to oil, and they'll become a deterrent. So attractions and deterrents are there in the good and bad karmas that we've done, and the residue of them are flowing in us. You see, you can't just ignore them. Like people just walk away and say, "Oh, I don't believe in karma." I just live in the moment. Well, there's an eternal moment, and if you lived in that, we'd be applauding you and probably bowing down to you. But there's this past, present, and future moment that has the three karmas attached to them, and the Prarabdha karma is a present that is wound up in enjoyment and suffering. The moment passes, you're living in it for sure, but as you live in it, you're suffering it, something, or as you live in it, the next moment you're enjoying something. See, so that sort of change doesn't take place in consciousness, in Brahman, in Atman, in Buddha nature. That's the still, calm, the peace that passes all understanding. That's the highest state of awareness. That's pure conscious awareness. So we have to remember that there's a difference between that, what people say, I'm living in the present moment, as living in the eternal moment. That's an entirely different level of realization. So nadis, I'm trying to get you into this idea that there are effects. And actually in the Upanishad here, at the end, they're going to talk about you have to get a hold of this oil. That's why they use the analogy there of the oil of the jasmine. Maybe I can read it straight out for you. Just like oil gets the fragrance of jasmine flower when it joins with it, the nadis inside of you get the good and bad deeds, smell of the good and bad deeds done. So you have to meditate on these nadis. But this point they're talking about Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. The Sushumna is at the forefront there. Yeah, here we are. That Sushumna Nadi is the one which makes you merge with the ultimate reality, Brahman, and is one without any deficiencies, and is of the form of Brahman. In each of the 72,000 nadis, there is a material which is like oil. This is taken out by meditation. Only in the case of the Sushumna is it not possible to separate this oily material out of it. So it's some kind of esoteric language, but what they're telling you in brief here is that with these nadis leading up to the Sushumna, they need purification. There's this oily substance flowing in, the combination of good and bad and mixed actions that's causing you, if you want to say from the feet to the knees to the thighs to the throat to the head, causing you to think, right? The whole thing is being fed to the brain, physically speaking, and it's being given to the mind. And the ego is also involved in it, as I was just saying. So basically, if what you're getting from your nervous system and your subtle nervous system is a kind of mixture of nectar and poison, then that's the way your thoughts are going to be. You're going to be sometimes blissful, sometimes fearful, sometimes balanced, sometimes restless. And depending on the oily substance of your energy, your prana, your psychic prana, your thoughts, your intelligence, till finally, when you find the Sushumna channel, the central channel, and all of these 72,000 nadis have been purified of everything that's at the feet, everything that's at the knees, everything that's at the generative organs, and everything that's at the neck, then you jump into that river called the Sushumna, and there's nothing impure to take out there. That's what they mean here by saying you cannot take anything, this oily material, out of the Sushumna. That's now turned into pure jasmine, as it were. It's like turned into pure transcendence. And it said earlier, it's the one that makes you merge in Brahman. So that's why I'm giving you kind of a heads up in advance to these final slokas, because that's where we're headed with this purification process. So a short Upanishad like that affords you an advanced look at things. You can read the 23 slokas in a few minutes and say, oh, I see where they're going with this. Then go back and do the symbolism and the practice that goes with it. So you have to reason first, you have to get instruction second, and then you have to do your sadhana. You can't just reason and let it go. You can't just reason and then get teachings from your teacher and not practice them. You've got to do all three. Rationale first, which is the Vedantic, early Vedanta way of telling you. Then go to the teacher when your mind is rational, that is, when these nadis have been purified, and hear the truth from them, the Shruti, and that would be your instructions, right? Here I instruct you to meditate and serve other beings as God and increase your devotion to God and so forth. Read the scriptures, keep reading the scriptures. So those are the 4 yogas. So I want you to do that, and then I want you to practice those things. Once you've heard my instructions, go practice them. Oh, for an ounce of practice is a great quote from Swami Vivekananda. Oh, there are books by the thousands, temples by the hundreds, but oh, for an ounce of practice. So this is the full circle of things, and this Upanishad is illustrating pretty much the same thing. So as I was saying, you've jumped then to the idea that there is a purification process going on of obstacles that have been placed in the way by certain conditionings. And these conditionings have probably happened in Pratitya Samutpata style over lifetimes. A lot of people are holding these conditionings over lifetimes. So this practice gives you a sharp knife. Kshurika says, enough of that, you see. Now, when you clear your actions and clear your direction, feet and knees, now you clear your family matters. I mean, that could be anything from not having families anymore, or to teaching your children the Dharma if you do have families, becoming a teacher of the Dharma and passing it on to others. It can be a monastic leaning, but definitely it's going to have to be cutting away the worldliness that attends upon families, societies, countries, in the Burloka, in the physical loka particularly, in order for you to, or it might cause you to retreat back into silence, into a cave, into a vow of silence, or into a kind of retreat inside of yourself, where you're going to be meditating upon these 3 nadis, Ida on the left, Pingala on the right, Sushumna up the middle. So this is a kind of symbology that, if first reading it, sounds very esoteric, but when you hear it enough, not only in the Upanishads, but in the Kundalini Yoga system, which I'll show you in a minute here, how it recurs in various philosophies. Then you must say, well, it's more than just esoteric. This is something I need to envision. So people are saying, how these great souls, they've seen Brahman. Why can't I see Brahman? And so the answer kind of comes back, it isn't said very often, because you're not going to see it with these eyes. So when you begin to meditate inside, you try to use your inner eyes to see it. And those are hardly any different than your outer eyes. So you're not going to see it there. You're looking for some object. And when you looked out here, you didn't find a real object, did you? You found a mass of swirling particles when you listened to those teachers. Scientists are called. So when you look inside, do you think it's going to be any different, that you're going to see actually real objects? That's not what the father of yoga said when you go into even Sampragata samadhis, that you begin to see that the outer objects have a connection to the inner objects that you're seeing in your dreams, or that you're imagining in your conceptions. So I think here I'll build a palace in the sky, you see, and I'll decorate it. So you're having these inner imaginations that are going on. If they're not focused, they're called daydreams, like what you were doing when you were sitting in boring Western school rooms, studying class from teachers who were boring. And when you were young in the Western society, maybe around the world in this day and age. So that was daydreaming. And then after that, there's a step called imagination. After that, there's a step of conception, which the intellectuals start to do. And after that, you might get to a stage called envisioning, where envisioning, the way it differs from the other three, is that you're taking something that's real and building a replica of it, like Ishtam, right? You take something who is real, like Jesus or Krishna or Buddha, and you rebuild them inside your mind's eye. And then you meditate upon them. See? Take the outer and the inner, render them into one indivisible state, then meditate on it and be free. That's how the seers of India say that. Shankara said that. Om Drishyam Pratitam Pravilapayansam. Antaha Sharirehi Jyotirmaya Hi Shubraha. All of those chants have to do with this outer and inner that needs to be returned to its pristine state of homogeneity. You say oneness, well, it was once two. No, it seemed to be two, but it was always one. So it takes a bunch of more words to try and explain the nature of consciousness, which is ever one. So you look for words like all-pervasive, or eternal in English, so that it will convey that homogeneity, that it's always one, you see. So all of this is getting us closer to the throat with these 72,000 nadis, because I've just mentioned how the problems there between the thighs, at the sexual generative organs, is what's being referred to here on the chart by now you're going to become free to transcend the physical. That's probably the most non-threatening way we can put it for people who are very much into their families, because there are a lot of people who are not very much into family, and many of those are monastic, and some of them are even non-monastic, and they've gone beyond the desire to have a family. And the cross-section of those, as Krishna says in the Gita, it's very hard to get a birth on earth, with those kinds of beings, because yogis don't have children. You'd really like to have a yogi and a yogini as your father and mother. But if you were to stare out of the heavenly loka, and you have to be reborn on earth again, as the Tibetan Buddhists are telling us, and you see your parents, combinations there of male and female couples, and they're looking to have children, then it's very difficult, Krishna says in the Gita, to find beings who are aware. So a birth like that is very hard to get in this world, Arjuna. I can quote the exact sloka in English for that. So there you have kind of the final comments I'll leave us with on this third level of generative organs, what the thighs mean. It means freedom to transcend the physical. The locale are the thighs, symbolically. The meaning is restricted power. Now, let's reread the sloka. By now, you've attained the Indra Vrashram, right? I hope you went around this week thinking that you were holding a powerful thunderbolt that will pierce through everything that gets in your way. The Indra Vrashram is inside of you, they said. So we'll start after that sloka, and that had to do with proper direction. You're blasting away your karma, and that's actually a quote from Swami Vivekananda. Blast your karma, and then you're getting a proper direction finally, because your karma is not sending you this way and that way, as he said, hither and thither, borrowing an English phrase. Now you've got the Indra Vrashram, and you've satisfied these two levels of obstacle, right? Karma and rebirth, basically. So now and how many hundreds and thousands of nadis have you purified by doing that? You see, just like I was saying just a second ago, basically people aren't seeing God inside because they're trying to look for an object. They're trying to use their eyes to see it. That's not the seeing the intelligence does. When the intelligence gets awakened, it sees as knowing. See? It sees as knowing. It doesn't see as something external from itself. It sees that it's identified fully with that, and that knowing gets rid of doubt and fear. And that's one of the drawbacks to conceptualization, and one of the pros for envisioning, if you can do it in the right way. Your teacher tells you part of that instruction he's giving you is to basically envision the Ishtam inside of the chamber of your heart, right? Meditate adi sam yoga namita hetu. Meditate in the shrine of your heart on yourself as the Lord. The Svetasvatara Upanisad says. Isn't that beautiful? Meditate in the shrine of your heart upon the Lord, which is your very self. See? So this puts you foremost in the picture as always one with the Father, with the Mother, with transcendent reality, with the light of Brahman. So that's going to be the result of getting free of these restrictions and conditionings, you see, so that you're going to not have restricted power anymore. See, there in family life, everyone's restricting your power, and you're doing a lot of that yourself. You should be out getting illumined so you can pass it on to your children, but instead you're catering to your children and family, and you're not letting you have a spiritual life, or you're allowing them to take away your spiritual life. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable for you, nor is it acceptable for what you want to give to your children and your family. See, so we were just reading about that last week in one of the God blogs. How Sri Ramakrishna said, somebody was talking to Swamiji and said, well, I can't do what you do, Vivekananda, because I have my wife and I have tantric rituals to do. And this was in India, and Swamiji said, you take care of your brothers and sisters and daughters, and then take care of your wife that same way. Then bring her around to your path of Vedanta and fix her and yourself at the feet of the Lord. Lock them into the feet of the Lord. And then go about your spiritual life free. So this is the destruction of restriction, see, in family life. You disallow everything that's in your way, just like because I mean, think about it. Everything that you're experiencing with your family being in the way of your progress happened here, didn't it? It had a source back in your karmas. You trained yourself to be that way. You trained yourself to be a bond slave, to work, and eventually that turned into the direction you took, which turned into the family that you were born into, and then had your own family as as a duplicate, a replicate of what you just experienced based on 12 nidanas, if you want to look into that Buddhist system, and coming around in samsara all the time, you see. So basically this teaching, which started out with the rational mind and turned into instruction from the rishis, now is beginning to dawn upon you. And I've just asked you the question, how many hundreds and thousands of nadis did you purify already? It's not like saying, oh, I didn't see my nadis get purified. I've still got them. I've still got all the miscolorings in them. No, how are you acting now? How are you thinking now? How are you breathing now? How are you meditating now? Sri Ramakrishna used to ask his devotees. Do you feel better today now that I wrote something on your tongue? You see, I transmitted some teachings into your mind. Don't you feel better today? So that's a good gauge by which you'll know that nadis have been purified. We can't be helpless, anymore in the face of these teachings. And we can't allow Maya just to exacerbate and cause us to start thinking that we're impure again and that we'll never reach the goal and these kinds of things. You did all this work and gained all this progress just to fall back into that again. So these are the things that we have to remind ourselves of. And one of those things that I'm accenting right now is that in your life of spiritual practice, you've already purified a lot of the hundreds and thousands of nadis that these rishis are telling the students about when they're young. See, you've already done that. Now continue. And how do we continue? Let's go on with the next level, which is there at the throat. The location you can see by the chart here is at the throat, right? And you can see that we're up there as far as chakras go in a higher chakra. So the locale's the neck, symbolically again. Meaning is veiled inner vision. And the result is orientation towards the inner realms. So if you're beginning to purify nadis from the heart inward to the throat, how many thousands of those are left over for you to purify, it's really a matter of natural course, because by the time you're at these higher levels of awareness, the poisons are verily moving aside for you. You've already got the Indra Vajram. You're moving inward with this power. You see that now it's not restricted anymore, and it helps you to transcend the senses and the physical. So now you find yourself in the internal realms now, which are symbolized by heart and throat. That is the Anahata chakra and the Vishuddha chakra, they call them. See? And then there's going to be the Agya chakra and the Sahasrara chakra. So this is how we were talking about last week, that Tantra and yoga and Vedanta and Buddhism, they all have this strong relationship with Kundalini yoga, with tantras, and with chakras, and with the way of proceeding that uses the body as a symbol for reality. Because long ago they learned you're not the body, so now what's the best way to use the body now that I know I'm not anything physical, obviously, is to use it as an image of God, like Jesus said. And so if you do that, then it can be used to demonstrate to you how the subtle body can also get transcended. That's your mind. See, all your physical bodies came out of your subtle body, the teachings say. It wasn't just the mating of your parents and conception, physically speaking, ovum and sperm and all that. That happened much later on a physical level. But the real conception on a subtler level happened in your mind when you decide to take on a form. Now I'll become a body, you said. See, and for whatever reason, and hopefully, as Vivekananda said, you come into the body manned in full awareness that's stated in these great scriptures, because you've, unlike some people who have created a lot of karma for themselves, you've destroyed a lot of karma for yourself, and you're coming into the body now with everything just waiting to happen spiritually for you. Enlightenment is beckoning you. That's how Swami Brahmananda, whose birthday is today, by the way, Om Kalindi Fulakamale Madhavena Kridarata Brahmanandam Nabastubhyam Sadguru Lokanayaka. That's how Swami Brahmananda, whose birthday is today, described that process. So that deserves remembering a great modern rishi like that. So now you have to attain a group of nadis near the neck and realize the 101 nadis there. Well, there's the answer to the question I was just posing. How many thousands, hundreds of thousands of nadis have you purified by the time your awareness rises to a higher center? You see, not in the body, but associated with the body, so that we can understand everything inward. So you attain the group of nadis at the neck, realize the 101 nadis there, and identify amongst them the best three. That's what I'm reading you the slokas now. So at the neck, where we just said, meaning is veiled inner vision, and the result is orientation to the inner realms. This is how a person begins to really live an inner life, an internal life. A contemplative life begins to fructify there. And so the result of that then is that this web of nerves has thinned out. You've purified the oil of good and bad karma with its fragrant and distasteful smells or residues up through the lower chakras, you see, and through the parts of the body associated with them into the subtle body. So now you have an inner life. You be, oh, I see all of this is happening in my mind, including my body, as I just said. It all happened in my mind before I was born. And then I projected it. So now that I'm in the mind, let's see if I can do something about those 101 nadis that are still giving me some problems, you see. They're still telling me, don't you want to come back and take another body again, reincarnate? Don't you want to fall back into the lower chakras again and play with those 72,000 nadis and discolor them again? Some Sunday afternoon over a bunch of fast food and a couple beers? Or shall I, go ahead and proceed with inner life? Because now I see these 101 nadis. See means, remember what I say, see inside? It doesn't mean with this eyes or with the subtle senses. That's the seeing. It's the knowing of consciousness, the seeing of intelligence. And that there's no separateness between the two. If you see something with the eyes, they say seeing is believing. I don't believe that. I don't believe that seeing is believing. Sorry. I'll do a double one-up on that. I don't believe in that believing. You see with your intelligence, with this eye opened. That's when you really see. Before that, it's all this and that, isn't it? Even my inner senses are seeing my dreams. Are they enlightening me? Are they real? Are they posing any true knowledge to me? Not unless they're very deep and getting closer to the ultimate. See? So getting closer to the ultimate there, they're telling about purifying these 101 nadis. So they say, identify the Ida nadi. That's going up the left. Pingala's going down the right. Sushumna's in the middle. I'm getting ahead of myself. You have to identify that left-hand nadi, Ida, which is the protector on the left side, the Pingala nadi on the right side, and understand the proper position of the Sushumna between them. So you would, there's just no word for it in English, and I hate to use the word feel. Even the word intuit is not very complete, but you're going to have to feel this or intuit it. Sense it is not a very good word either, but this is why they're saying this is the seeing of knowledge, is that you become aware, is maybe a good way of saying it, of these three channels. You become aware of these three channels. My God blog last week was Subtle Things in Meditation, I called it. See, and Swamiji was saying how, talking to one devotee, he said, when I was just young in my teens, at the Bharanagore monastery, which is this old haunted place that the devotees of Ramakrishna rented after he had passed away. I was sitting in meditation once as a young man, in the Bharanagore monastery, and all of a sudden I saw the three nadis. And he said, once you find those and you identify the Sushumna, then you can see anything you want in consciousness. And of course, those are real things you're seeing now. The unreal things have become shown up as being temporary, changeful, pain-bearing, as Father of Yoga calls it, you see. So this is the language of the Upanishads. This is the province of the enlightened. Gaudapada just spoke to me. It's the province of the enlightened. So you know it when you see it. The one who identifies this, Sushumna, is the only one who understands the secret of the Vedas. So that's why I was saying last week, is that the secret of the Vedas is just not discovering the Upanishads in them. It's not even just reading them. It's not even reading them in the company of an illumined soul who can instruct you. They're their own secret. And this secret is having reached the central channel where consciousness flows in a pure, unadulterated state, free from all of these colorations, free from jasmine, free from bad fragrances, free from actions, free from procreation, and free from misdirection, and free from all the other participation of different currents that are flowing through the creation of God, if you want to put it for that. That's the secret. You reach the Sushumna, and that takes you to Brahman. So that's why I already read it. This one nerve, Sushumna Nadi, makes you merge with the ultimate reality, because it's the only one without any deficiencies. So you don't have to remove any oil from it. If there is any oil moving there, and they called that, red purple kind of color, and later on in Kundalini Yoga, you'll find them just describing that it's not to be removed, it's to be gathered. So if the yogis can get so high and so deep as to reach the top of the Sushumna, where Shakti is wanting to join with Lord Shiva, they'll see that nectar hanging off of that nadi, like honey drifting off of crevices, see, underground. And they'll gather that, the Upanishad, the Tantras say, and they'll take it to Mother and give it to her. First, they'll give some to the gods, so that the gods won't interrupt their search for enlightenment anymore, because the gods are down there, as it were, embroiled in living lives of deities. So this great renouncer of all lands, heavens, earths, and hells, and all other lokas, gathers this nectar and gives it to the Mother. So here's the nectar of my search, O Divine Mother of the Universe. She's pleased with that. She knows you've reached the highest. She takes you into Brahman. See? Chitti Shakti iti. Va Chitti Shakti iti. Patanjali says she takes that soul who has stripped away all name and form from the picture, and takes off the tendency to transmigrate anymore in bodies of any kind, in worlds of any kind, and takes them straight into their final emancipation. Koivalya pratistam, the steady state of freedom from everything that has to do with name and form, like nature. So that's what she'll do with the soul who offers her this nectar, because it's a proof that he's found it, that he's reached the top of the ladder, Sushumna. See, and secretly she's been guiding him the whole way. She wants to merge again with Lord Shiva again. at the top, you see. The many, this is why Kali dances and claps her hand, you see, basically is that she's in joy every time a soul gets enlightenment, because she's there with that soul and she gets to have the enlightenment again and again and again with every soul that gains enlightenment. So it's like exquisite, the experience of that. And so she's been the guide, she's also the participant, and she's also the one that takes the soul and deposits it, merges it into Brahman, as is said here. Ultimate reality. So as my addition there, it's not possible to separate that substance out of the Sushumna. You gather it. I'm adding that in from a later Upanishad. So this explains here, and then the locales, the neck. The meaning is veiled inner vision. So you want to remove those veils. And then the result is orientation to the inner realms. The quote from the Upanishad is there. Gains victory over all things physical and mental and reaches the birthless, deathless state. That's very much Upanishadic language, isn't it? So we've taken the whole chart, except this sidebar. You see then at the sidebar then, down here where you're working with old karma, you see it says there, discovers the laws of karma. I've already said that. Sanjita past, Prarabdha present, Agami in the future. You want to get control of that at that level, right? And the next level at the knees has to do more with discovers one's inner power. So the Indra Vajram, that's what that signifies. It's like Mother says, well, you need a tool for this. It's not going to be, you've only gone part way and you've still got the collective consciousness of your family and ancestors to deal with coming up. So you better have a strong tool for that to keep you on the path. That's Indra Vajram, the weapon of the highest God, because Indra is standing at the top of the pantheon of gods, which the ancestors worship, And so if you're going to penetrate past him, as Sri Ramakrishna mentioned doing in the Gospel of Ramakrishna when he was involved in opening up the Sushumna for hundreds and thousands of souls and reaching Mahasamadhi like he did, then you're going to have to convince Indra, as it were, that you're ready for that you're beyond all kinds of collective mind desires. I mean, because you were so busy suffering from them here, and you're busy trying to purify them here, and all of a sudden you're there on the scene with it. So that's why you discover your own inner power. Without that, you can't do anything. That's what we'd probably say, breathe, get your prana together, connect the prana to your mind. That's your psychic prana, your thoughts. Get your thoughts together, focus them on Shakti. You see, so prana to psychic prana to Shakti is the important juncture there that people need to make so they go beyond the physical body and the senses and all the things that happen to them when they believe that they are the physical body, and their consciousness only has to do with sensual things. So they're completely missing all the higher points and higher attainments of spiritual life. And it would be better to come into life with those next time, at least some sort of awareness of them. So that's the sidebar. Next part of the sidebar, discovers a skillful I skipped one, discovers inner power. We got that. Okay. Then the sidebar ends up with discovers skillful means of practice. And that's why I was saying earlier, you would start off with and getting your mind, hearing the teachings, rationale about them, reasoning would be a good word. And then get the instructions from the teacher at that point, because you don't have to bother the teacher with irrational thinking. And then once you get instructions from the teacher, then do the practice he gives you, and you're free. Go thou from place to place and help them out of darkness now, as Vivekananda says in his poem. Without the fear of pain or the fear of pleasure, without the fear of pain or search for pleasure, go beyond them both, right? So Vivekananda thought this was such an important process that he put it down in a beautiful 11 verses called the Song of the Sannyasin that many of us have memorized. So that's the three parts of the sidebar, or was missing one? Laws of karma, then discover the inner power. Discover, yes, skillful means that's at the level of those neck and purifying. You come to those 101 nadis that you see with your knowledge, because if the 101 nerves at that level of seeing are not purified, then what do you get? Veiled vision. You get veiled vision. So we see people in that quandary, is that their spiritual life didn't quite make it, to the third eye, you might say, and it's still like gravitating to the neck, as it were. And if you make a study of the chakras, as we have done before, then that becomes clear and evident. And so then what's beyond that, as we go to the ultimate place here, is to discover the secrets of the Vedas. And that's where we just left off here with this Upanishad. That one who identifies the Ida and the Pingala, and then finds the Sushumna centered in between them, and then flows in the Sushumna, only that one understands the secrets of the Vedas. So all the Vedas, with their Upanishads and all of the Upanishadic seers, are in Congress. They're on the same page of this return to the perfect state of consciousness with a capital C. Somehow there's been a fall in one religion. At other times there's been a veiling going on. Other times there's been covering power. Other times there's been sin and ignorance. There's so many things that have gone on through the sweep of time in the vast expanse of space. But the Upanishadic seers are saying, we found a secret to all this, and you want to come, then come along. A new man has come to show us the way. I could sing it. Esheche Nutan Manas. Dek Bijodi Aichale. There's a new man who has come. That's an avatar in each age that will conduct us in to this ancient wisdom of the Upanishads. And we will see the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna with our knowledge. With our knowledge eye, we will see it. Because we are that. And then that's just bringing together the full identity of the apparently individualized soul with the perfect soul, with the Jivatman or Shivatman or Paramatman. So up the sidebar, I wanted to take you, it's the last thing I put on this chart because I wanted to describe in other words that were helpful, these levels, 5 of them that they're talking about basically in this Upanishad. And it all relegated to the simple thing about feet, knees, neck and so forth, so that this human body can be seen as an image of God. I think that's my definition to Christ saying about cut himself in the image of God. You certainly wouldn't want to look out to the image of most people nowadays and try and put God there. It's not going to wash. But what did he really mean by the image of God? He meant that the soul of mankind is divine, like Swamiji came forth to say and tell us in this very last century. And so that's what my reckoning or rendering of the being cut in the image of God is all about, is that the secret of the Upanishads has made us return to this highest rendering or reckoning of consciousness. Only thing remains to be done here is to read you the final slokas of conclusion. So you have to meditate on this nadi. It's like, then meditate upon that pass your time contentedly and be free, right? You can see how even Sears, in 700 AD, as recent as that is, like Shankara, came to this conclusion from his commentaries on the Upanishads. So meditate upon this nadi. Then that's sloka 16. 17 through 21 are these. Then this being who has won over his mental senses, because the physical and emotional, all those senses were won over, right? Now he's won over his mental senses when his view opens up and he can see everything properly. So meditate, his mastered his mental senses, it says, now sit in a place without any sound, become detached, realize the philosophy of yoga, become one with no desires, and should withdraw within himself, like lamps getting put out one by one after they are lit together. So that's why I put this up here in our top, right? Basically, or was it at the bottom? Gaining mastery over the mind and its subtle senses, sitting in deepest silence, the philosophy of yoga duly realized as the various lamps of desire are snuffed out one by one. So desire can happen at many levels, but you probably still have some desires to look at in the Ida and Pingala nerve, the rising and falling of the beauty of manifestation and expression, the divine Leela and all that. So I can attain just a perfect witness state of it all and be unaffected by the rising and falling of phenomena of any kind. Be very careful not to create any more karma in that way, any more samskaras. So 17 through 21 says that to us. Then 22 says, the one who realizes yoga through intense practice of pranayama and meditation on Om cuts off the bonds of family life using the very sharp mind called Kshurika, which has been sharpened using the efficient sharpener of renunciation, and gets freedom from all bondage. So, of course, putting this process and its culmination in a few sentences is a very difficult thing to do, but you can see the key parts to what's going on there. There's the practice of prana. There's the coming to hear, again, not with these ears, hear inside the sound of Om, the pranava. And that word is mentioned here. The sound of Om. And then renunciation is enjoined there in order to get free from all bondage. And the final sloka, so that we make sure we make it in this 2-class series on this short Upanishad, says, the one who gets freedom from desires reaches the deathless state. The one who gets freedom from all desires by cutting off all desires and affections becomes devoid of all bondages. And therefore, sahana bhavatu, sahana bhunaktu, sahavirya karavahai, and ends with that peace chant. So this is one of these Upanishads that starts with Om Apayantu Mamangani Vak Pranaschakshu Shotamat and ends with Om Sahana Bhavatu. So we have those 2 peace chants of the 7 available to us, which are kind of like landmarks, aren't they? They're kind of like designators for us. If we see a peace chant before we start reading Upanishad or after we finish an Upanishad, we can say, that was an Upanishad, because that's where they appear, those 7. And very important. So that's the Kshurika Upanishad as far as the slokas go and as far as a rendering of what is said in the slokas. And we covered everything, like I said there. So that can be looked back on in the video recordings that we're doing of these 2. With the time remaining, which I'm not sure how much it is, but if I some 10 minutes, I want to make a connection at least to one of these other charts that I've found to be very much in conjunction with not only Kshurika Upanishad, but with those Upanishads that have a flavor of the chakras to them, like the Kundalini Upanishads, you like to call them. So we know that, I said last week, there's like at least 7 or 8 Shakti Upanishads, Divine Mother. We've studied them in Seattle on our retreats over the years. Devi Upanishad and so forth. And then there's some Upanishads that are about 20, they say, that are yoga Upanishads. They speak about yoga. And when they speak about yoga, it's as if they just cannot help but bring in Kundalini. It's like, we're talking to you the Vedanta right now, but there's this Tantra that keeps pressing in on my Vedantic discourse here that is such a good way of explaining things that I'm going to bring it into the discourse, you see, and show you how these 2 rivers of Vedanta and Tantra have merged and come out of each other and merged again, and all going into the ocean of Brahman, as if that were the Sushumna itself, you see, this pathway of the scriptures. So that's why I'm saying here that some of these Upanishads, like the Darshana Upanishad, we find great soul like Dattatreya. So we know him as like the Avatut, right? And have written, we did a whole series on the Avatuta Gita recently. So you see here, Dattatreya is talking in much the same way when he talks about locations in the body. Look about at the chart now, how earth, water, fire, air, and ether have been put at these very locations, at the feet, at the knees, at the hips, at the heart, and at the throat. So again, and this is on the sacred image of Lord Shiva, Nataraj is back there, and you can see the acolyte, the devotee, bowing to him. And then when you read the Darshana Upanishad, so much like what Kshurika is trying to tell us here, on the left-hand side, on the way up, you see that they've also put it together with 5 gods. So you've got these 5 approportions of the body, and you've got then the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Then you've got 5 gods that go with them. So this is like another huge teaching on Pancha, right? The Pancha Maya Kosha and Pancha elements, Pancha Mahabhutas and so forth. And you can see the 5 gods there are designated in conjunction with the 5 elements. So Lord Brahma, Dharana of earth. So what do they mean by that? It means that you need to meditate on earth. Why? Because it was on earth that you did these actions, right? At the feet. On earth, at the feet, however you want to put that, you need to meditate there and dissemble whatever happened there. Transcend it, purify it. There's nadis there that need purification. At the lowest chakra, if you want to put it that, because by the way, since we're discussing 5, they're pretty much, 5 of everything here. So you've got 5 chakras with their 5 bijams, right? Is that on the right chart for that? Yeah, Lam, Vam, Ram, Yam, and Hum are these 5 great words that go with these chakras. And they're also going with these 5 gods. Brahma was first, the bijam is Lam. Vishnu is where you meditate on water. You have dharana of water. This is the teaching that Dattatreya gave to, guess who? One of our favorite rishis. We'll encounter him later. But he gives this discourse to his great students. So basically, when you're talking about the knees, then straight across the knees is dharana of water, and bijam is vam. Then at the hips or thighs is as a conjuncture that is similar to the knees and the hips. They're putting those together in this case. Then Rudra is the 3rd deity of fire. And so you have dharana. Dharana means concentration, right? It's like the 6th limb of yoga. So you're having concentration on fire. And the bijam with that is Ram. And then Ishvara is the next inward deity, penultimate deity in this reckoning. And that's the dharana of air you're talking about, which is there and in the forehead, as it were. The bijam is Yam. And then Sadashiva is the highest and deepest of all gods with form, all deities. And that dharana you're having in conjunction with him is ether, space, all the akashas. And the bijam for that is Hum. So this is, and then Om is existing there, just like in the Kshurika Upanisad, which talk about right at the very end, slokas are saying, awaken, control your prana, and then you'll hear the sound of Om. And then with that as an inner guide, it's like an attracting power. Some people see the light, some people hear the sound, and that's all drawing the consciousness towards inner life. So you can see here, just bringing in an Upanishad that we looked at, well, I don't know how many seminars ago this was, 3 or 4, or maybe it was a retreat we took, that I showed you this chart and the avocado chart, I like to call it, is how the 5, with these 5 sets of 5, these 4 sets of 5, there's another set of 5s called the upper 5 limbs of yoga. And that's how Vedanta describes yoga. So Vedanta describes yoga, it describes Kundalini yoga, it describes Divine Mother, and it describes Sadashiva and Vishnu. So basically, all of these are contained within each of those 108 Upanishads. Some of them take those up as their main subject matter. So Lord Dattatreya says, out of the Darshana Upanishad, concentration of ether, air, fire, water, and earth should be made, replete with chanting of the Pancha Bhuta bijams of Hum, Yam, Ram, Yam, and Lam. Place all of these along with their specific deities in the 5 sacred places of your body. So nice condensation in there of almost all the teachings we've had here, how this great Lord Dattatreya, this Avadhuta, king of the Avadhutas, you might say, is describing how to put these together in your classic, what do you call it? Yogic Vedantic Kundalini meditation. It's all coming together and showing how the solidarity of all the darshanas of India is just set and perfect in their way of guiding souls back to this ultimate station of highest awareness. I found Rishi Pipalada getting into the act and put his quote at the bottom of this. Those who are unable to concentrate on the matras of Om, A-U-N-M, the bijams, and the tattvas, render consciousness fragmented and leave awareness disconnected. They wander the 3 worlds, subject to the sufferings of rebirth again and again. And then this beautiful image at the bottom, of course, is all about those kinds of souls who get reborn again, become young, live young lives, forget to connect the bijams, forget to meditate on Om, wander the 3 worlds, get old, die, think themselves dying, and think themselves dead, and then all of a sudden wake up again in the womb, as it were, and get born again into bodies. And both death and the mother of birth are there to make sure this all happens in a nice round of cycle that they've come to call things like samsara and maya. So Pipalada's beautiful quote there goes very well with this, because this kind of homework is to be done by the spiritual practitioner. And you can see what it entails in an Upanishad like this. You just think of it from now on: feet, knees, eyes. Those 3 alone, are going to purify 690 some thousand of the Upanishads that are impure, and the other 101 are left for you to espy now as your consciousness centers around higher things, heart and throat, or begins to meditate on deities that have to do with the origin of the Pancha Mahabuddhas. What else is suggested in all of this? Kundalini, yoga, Vedanta, Tantra. Samkhya is suggesting it. Didn't Rishi Pipalada just said if they can't concentrate on the mantras, on the bijams, and on the tattvas, so you could see at one time all of this in Kapil's time was a routine regimen that he advised 24 times. He wanted you to meditate on the 5 elements, connect them to the 5 senses, connect those to the fourfold mind, to the subtle senses, of course, and the tanmatras, then to the fourfold mind. So you could see how these rishis have all, this isn't just, oh, that's just characteristic of Indian philosophy. No, this is characteristic of Indian realization. This is characteristic of rishis who saw that people were getting lost. And so they left it for all time for people to use. Oh, they'll adapt their own language to it. Samkhya did, yoga did, Vedanta did, Buddhism did, Tantra did. And then they'll find out that this was an eternal truth that we were calling Sanatana Dharma yesterday at satsang. And then they'll follow it and they'll return to the original state of mind, pure mind, chit shuddhi. And all of this will be like a dream that they had. And hopefully they'll never wander back into the dreaming state again. The Atman does not dream, does not die. It's never born. So in that way, then they can remain in that witness consciousness, which the Atman so well represents, and higher. To put a capper on it then, before we close our second and final class on a very nice Upanishad, which I'm glad we made some progress in, then Dattatreya says this, another dharana should be made. So we've 5 dharanas, right? He's talking about here. And it's very similar to the 5 layers that we talked about here. So he says, now another dharana should be made. I like this very much. Suppress all the gods, like Brahma, into the causal self, and place Shiva, the personification of wisdom, in the Jivatma. So you see what he's saying here is all of these go back into their causal state. Keep Shiva and put it in yourself. Then take avyakta, that's all that is unmanifested, or all that is formless, and merge it into the entire soul while chanting the pranava. That's Om. This will dissolve transgressions. So here's, let's call it then the dharana on formlessness. So you can see how all of this has had to do with form. Words like the 5 bijams, tattvas like the 5 elements, deities like the 5 seats of the goddess, the gods. All of this had to do with form, hasn't it? But then this Avadhuta says, oh, here's one other thing I want you to do. Get ready for formless reality. Do dharana on the avyaktam. But first, store all of these back inside of yourself, right? It's because when they come out again, they're going to be of benefit to other people. Just like Dattatreya has come out again as the Avadhuta and has left behind the Avadhuta Gita and other great teachings long, long time after he left behind the Darshana Upanishad. And this was only one of the Upanishads I wanted to get to in this vein. The other was the Upanishad where we studied about the Dabala Darshana Upanishad and how the tree of yoga is talked about there in very much similar terms the way it's talked about in these 2 that I've mentioned. And there was one other called the avocado chart, you see, that I wanted to bring out too, that had to do with the Amritanada Upanishad, which has to do with 5 again, right? Pranayam, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyan, and Samadhi. And if you study these in a flow with a teacher in a series of classes, and you have the time to give to it, and you reflect back on it later, then all of this is going to make very cohesive sense to you. You're actually plumbing the depths of the eternal path. And so that's one of the great messages, I think, that came out in today's class. Reason about it all, then get instruction, then do sadhana, practice. Those three things are necessary to pull all of this together. Let's end here then with our chant. Sing a little bit about Mother Kundalini. Sarva Jnana Shakti Mahakundalini Jivatma Paramatma Dharini Shri Devi Rudrani Kalaratri Devi Vidya Avidya Devi Maheshani Shri Yogamai Chit Shakti Devi Jaya Vijaya Devi Vasundari Shri Mantra Shakti Mata Deva Devi Dasatatva Devi Shakti Dharini Shri Devi Padam Shri Devi Padam Shri Devi Padam Shri Devi Padam Om Shtapakaya Cha Dharmasya Sarvadharma Svarupine Avataravarishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namah